Hello and welcome back to Double Radio Games Club. We've played a game and we want to talk about it.
We do that sometimes.
We do occasionally.
we sometimes play games on this video game podcast.
Sometimes we play games and then we talk about them. This time it's Guardians of the Galaxy. We've all played Guardians of the Galaxy and we want to talk about it. Is everyone excited to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Woo! I just want to let everyone know why I was doing a whole dance before during the intro, and you can't see any of it because we have an intro screen.
It was a very nice dance, though.
It was a very nice dance.
Yeah.
Made even better by the fact that I know you can't hear the music.
I kind of had to improvise a little.
I gotta get it set up so that it works. It's a process, but
so I could actually dance to it.
The first 15-20 minutes, maybe depending on how much we talk about without getting into spoilers, we are going to have a non-spoiler kind of discussion, and then we're going to go into full spoilers. So when we give a spoiler warning, that means beyond that point, full spoilers of Guardians of the Galaxy. Be ready for that, and if you haven't played it yet, get out and either play it or don't if you don't want to. We don't tell you what to do. All right.
Except for our last episode of the podcast where I told you to go play what was it? I think it was just MCC or something.
Yeah.
The last episode of the podcast where he told you to watch Violet Evergarden. So actually, we do tell you what to do extremely often.
We tell you what to do quite a lot, and also
and
judge you for it.
And we deny it after the fact.
Right. With that, let's get started. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, I would love to say this is the first major Marvel game aside from Spider-Man. It's not.
Well, let's pretend. It's better that
for
way.
the sake of this, we're gonna pretend.
Go through this discussion like Avengers just doesn't exist.
Yep.
Like,
Avengers
because it has nothing to do with Avengers, other than it's a Marvel game that was published by Square. That is the only connection.
Eidos did also assist in Avengers development at some points, so there is a little bit of overlap, which was I think a lot of the concern.
It was more of a we're working with you guys out of pity more than anything else.
They were contractually obligated to work with them. That's kind of the situation.
Right.
So I gotta say, Eidos, having not put out a game recently, mostly been doing just random other assistance things with Square since Deus Ex has kind of been in the cooler. This is a great first showing, especially for a new style of game. I think let's first, before we go anything into the story, because obviously that's where we're going to get more spoiler risk, talk about gameplay and length. So I think the gameplay in this game, I talked to White about this, is most reminiscent of Final Fantasy 15.
Oh my.
It's true.
Which is scarily accurate, but I think we could have a decent discussion on why it's way more fun here.
Yeah, why it works way better.
15. Yeah.
I do think that if you are a person where gameplay is incredibly important and you're a big fan of RPGs and you like the more complicated systems, this may not work perfectly for you.
It's pretty simple. But
and I also think it's very easy.
Yeah.
It has an issue of like if you're looking for difficulty here, you're not gonna get it. So know that going in.
Yeah. Do we want to describe what the combat is like before we
definitely
keep talking about it? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to set a baseline for people
right.
to kind of compare it to. So, Wyatt, you brought it up. You want to go through a description?
Yeah, I can go for it. So you play purely as Star-Lord and no other Guardians, which I'm sure we'll talk about because that's been a pretty big talking point in terms of how combat's set up. But basically, you play just as Star-Lord, and during combat, you can shoot guys with your guns, and you can shoot guys with your guns. You can shoot them with your guns, and you can also shoot them with your guns. Right.
You can punch them with your guns, yeah.
You can punch them with your guns, that's correct. And sometimes that's way more effective than shooting them with your guns.
Hey, sometimes you also get grenades. One grenade. You get one grenade.
You get the aerial missile spray thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You do get some special abilities that are on a cooldown that you unlock through the game by collecting certain crafting materials, and now whenever
or hitting certain story points.
Or hitting certain story points, that's correct. And then outside of that, you can command the Guardians to do different things using certain attacks on certain enemies or a specific certain enemy. And ideally it's, like there's this enemy, it's best to use this attack and it's best to use these types of strategies. However, like we said, the game isn't super difficult, so you don't really have to think that hard about combining different attacks together. It's satisfying and it can be fun to like, okay, hold everyone down with Groot, and then Rocket's gonna come in with his giant like 50 machine guns and grenade launchers and do something with that. It's fun to like coordinate those things, but it's not really that necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I was gonna say that I don't think that lack of for some people it will be, but especially for me after like I'm waiting for like coming off of like playing Dark Souls again and like waiting for like Elden Ring and doing all these like it's fun to not have to play a game that it's fun to play a game that isn't like ball bustingly difficult.
Sometimes a surface level experience can be like exactly
It's
what
yeah.
you're
It's also a
Because
good
you
length
have
for it, right?
yeah, exactly. Because and I think that pacing of when, and obviously no specifics here, but like when they give you the new abilities, it's just like, oh, like I'm kind of feeling like a little bit stale with what Star Lord can do. And it's like, oh, here's a new
yeah.
thing that you can
It
do
felt
now at this point in the story.
Yeah.
it felt really well paced in that regard.
Yeah.
And I think like the secret to combat that isn't difficult but is still fun is a combat system where it's keeping you actively engaged enough, but not enough where it's really putting a lot of
Yeah.
pressure on you.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're still like engaging in the combat, even if it's not
Yeah.
that stressful or that difficult. And I think it
It's
pulls that off pretty well here.
it's a very good flow state game. At least it was for
Yes.
me. Where after when I got like everyone's abilities all unlocked, and I was just like, it was just like, I got this perfect combo for these exact like kinds of enemies, and I'm just gonna wait for all their limit breaks to fill up and just like unleash all of them. And I don't even have to look at the controller. I just know exactly where they all are, and it's not like I'm not dying if I do it wrong. But it gave me a very similar feeling to funnily enough, Chrono Trigger, where I could just like, oh yeah, just all the menus, just nothing. All these words, I don't even have to read them. I just know where
Mhm.
all the things are, and I just press the button, and they all happen.
Yeah.
And it feels great.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think the most like accurate kind of difficulty comparison I could make is probably to like an Uncharted game. It kind of follows that flow of like gradually getting more complicated, but not necessarily getting more difficult, which works pretty well for the most part. I
would
do
also say if you play the Batman Arkham games on an easier difficulty, again, it keeps you engaged enough with enemy variety, but it isn't that challenging overall. There's like another good.
And I think this is a case where if the game was any longer, it would probably start to fall apart a little bit because they do a good job of spreading things out, so you're constantly getting something every hour or so. But if you push that longer, there's not any buttons left on the controller to use.
Yeah,
It kind of hits the point of like that they've hit the maximum of what you can allow. And I think it especially shows in the kind of like progression purchasing thing because I ran out of things to buy from the workstation very quickly from just like exploring a little more in levels, and then basically a lot of the exploration boiled down to finding materials that were now not useful for the rest of the game. Like there's nothing else I could do with them.
It's one of the few examples where I wish things were a little bit more expensive than they were.
Yeah, it definitely
Just so
felt
that
like
you
don't
could
need to
spread
explore
out-
super much.
just so that you could spread out the progression a little bit more. But
Because I don't think this is spoilers. You can shoot me through my laptop screen if it is, but I mean the biggest incentive for exploration is because you have so many cool outfits that you can find in the environment.
we're good.
Um,
No, we're good.
and
We're good.
oh, I thought you put it up, so I thought that was which like for me especially, who's always going after like the fashion frame or the fashion souls, and like it's like the closest thing you have to that in this game, and also a lot of them look really good. Um, so of course I'm gonna want to explore to find stuff, and when it's not an outfit, it's usually these parts. And maybe if you don't explore for the whole game, then you end up having more of what maybe the intended progression of those purchasable abilities were. But if you go looking for any of them, you'll end up with a lot more materials than you'll ever need. Pretty much.
I will say I thought I did a pretty decent job at like finding the costumes, but when I got to the end of the game, I definitely missed a few.
Yeah,
I have to
people.
wonder if some of them are locked to roots, without going into spoilers,
That would make
because
sense.
I do feel like I explored pretty thoroughly and had like 2/3 of the costumes.
And also, this is speaking personally. A lot of the costumes that I picked up were like funny and cool, especially if they reference like a certain comic book series and they give you a lot of information about like that
Yeah.
specific issue. But there weren't a lot of costumes that I liked wearing. Like the Rocket in a tux suit was like, oh, that's cool, but I didn't really want to like use
You're
it for
telling me
that
you
much.
didn't want to wear that? What the hell's wrong with you?
I think I agree with Wyatt, and I think the problem for me was that a lot of the costumes change like the physical look of the character to where my brain can now no longer associate them as the same character, right? Because I think this CM Punk has a Drax skin, right? So of course I want to use the CM Punk Drax skin, but I didn't use it because he doesn't look like Drax anymore. The Drax in this game. So it was
and like a good example, I think a better example than the tux, because I'm sure there's some people that want to see Rocket in a tux. And if I play the game again where I know the story and I'm not as invested because I know what's happening, I might do the goofier costumes. But a better example is like I would never put the Nova Corps like suits on any of the Guardians because it looks weird and it doesn't make sense given their like relationship with Nova Corps. I don't know, like that's just a very personal thing, but it would
I would
feel
have loved to
weird
see
playing the whole
more
game.
like just different outfits, right? Not necessarily
Yeah,
full
yeah.
costume changes.
Although they did have the ones from the movies, which was cool.
Yeah, those are cool. A lot of the outfits are very neat. It's just a personal thing of like.
Well, I also think it speaks to how strong the base like character design is, where it's like
Yeah,
there were
very
very
good.
few. I loved Groot's character design in this, where he's got some like armor and some technology like that like
Yeah.
Rocket made for him stuff. And there were very few Groot outfits I wanted to switch to because I just loved the default one so much. I think that's the other side of it, where I think they're just so well designed by default that I didn't want to switch to anything else, just because.
And hey, you don't need to
so
pay money
solid.
for any of them, which is really
You
good.
don't. Yeah.
That's really nice.
Imagine that.
And yeah, so I think this is kind of the level of the gameplay importance here is kind of like The Witcher 3, right? Where the main thing you're going to be playing this for is to see the story and different paths you can take and whatnot, and character interactions. The gameplay is kind of there to get you to the next point. An important note here, you don't have to aim. There's no aiming in this game. It's
true,
constant
It's a
lock-on
lock-on.
range combat. So I think if you're a person that likes the idea of playing a shooter but maybe gets stressed out having to aim on a controller or something, you're not going to have that problem with this game. It's very much a lock-on system that works pretty well for the most part.
I'm actually very surprised that this isn't among the games that has that's in the accessibility category in the Game Awards, because the amount of settings that you have for like difficulty specificalty, um you can like
Fancy.
enemy health, weapon damage, ability burnout and stuff, like all these things are like
Very
they
tunable.
have meters for all of them. So if you do find the game like too hard, or like, oh, enemies are too bullet spongy, well, bring the health down and put your blaster damage up. That's
Do you
I ended up doing that, and it ended up just being more fun to just obliterate everyone because it wasn't really demanding in the first place.
Was Eidos the studio that made the Thief remake or the Thief reboot?
I want to say they weren't,
Because
but I'll double check for you.
because in the back of my mind I
They
thought
were.
they did, because
Yeah, they did.
yeah, because
Huh.
here's the thing is that they've done a similar thing with difficulty. If you remember Thief had pages and pages of difficulty settings. And the
So
other
did
thing
Deus
too,
Ex has had that in the newer game as well.
I kind of wish, like, because there's always, I think we've had this debate before of like having one set difficulty for the game versus having like different tiered difficulties, right?
Yeah.
If you want to, I feel like the best way to do it if you want to have different difficulties for your game is to allow people to like further customize specific aspects of difficulty. Because you can really tailor the experience to whoever you're playing. Because like if you felt like, oh, okay, I feel like these enemies are kind of like bullet sponges, right? You can very easily just like, okay, I want to lower the enemy HP, which I think was one of the options.
Yeah,
Like, that's
and
a
for
great
example,
way.
of the opposite way to do that. So what I ended up doing is making enemy HP higher, but making my ability cooldowns lower, so that I could get you get like a bonus when you use successive abilities on enemies to just multiply your damage output by up to like 5 times. If
I
you
really
manage
hope we
to get
start
everything. So
I really hope we start to see game difficulty accessibility as like a
this is-
standard feature.
It's funny because this is another thing, as I'm noticing I'm playing more like older PS1 and PS2 games, and how they have like just complete controller remappability in a PS2 game, and that's like a weirdly rare thing to see today for console
It's more
games.
common in this console generation that
Yeah,
it was.
it's
but
becoming more
for
common
a
again.
while that didn't happen, and
Yeah.
now also I'm noticing playing these older games like how Silent Hill 2 has like separate enemy and puzzle difficulty, and how System Shock 2 has separate like enemy, puzzle, like all these different like difficulty settings for all these things, and like Pathologic is the same way, and I think on top of that it would be nice with how Pathologic does it, where they have a little like a notch in the meter where that's the developer recommended
Yeah.
difficulty, where the game was like designed around, because it makes sense. It's like the same thing with how like most Halo games are designed around like heroic difficulty. Like you design your game around a certain way to be played, but on top of that, after telling people, you let them do whatever the hell they want with it. I think that should be
And to be
a
honest,
lot more
I feel
common
like
nowadays.
that's the kind of, if Dark Souls or Elden Ring ever gets a difficulty setting, I would love to see that approach to it, where it's
If
just like,
anything, yeah.
here's just a list of the modifiers we have. Feel free to tweak them if you want to. I feel like that's the way to go for a lot of games that don't really have an easy solution to difficulty, where you can't do things like the AI gets more complicated or whatnot just because of your engine or however you're programming the game. This is a nice way to do it. Is I've been playing Skyrim again recently, and I have a mod that allows me to do that to the difficulty, where I can just like tweak settings on it that make it more fun to play throughout the entire time. So I feel like it's a good approach.
Yeah, definitely take notes from this and from Last of Us 2 in terms of like
Absolutely.
accessibility, like gameplay and difficulty accessibility.
All right, so gameplay, I think overall we're pretty even on, like, it's good, maybe not the best thing, but it doesn't need to be, right? It does what it needs to do. Now let's talk about story and give our overall kind of impressions of the game itself. We're not going to go into spoilers yet, but just kind of, what did you think of the storyline? Was it good for you? Did the character interaction seem great? Probably yes.
Yeah,
I
loved it. I was actually really surprised at how good it was. I was really surprised at how like character centric and emotional it got too.
And how many characters were involved here. We got like a good number of,
it's outside of just the Guardians themselves. Yeah, it's a good cast, and I was really shocked. Like at some moments where they really play with not to get into spoilers, but they kind of break their own rules to put it in a vague way without spoiling things that were really interesting. And there were moments where they were surprisingly really effective for me. I was genuinely shocked at moments. I was like, wow, this is really working for me.
And how different choices can be. So I went and watched someone who made different choices, and it was not like completely different, but you can see that it has an effect on the game, right?
I'd say it's definitely worth a second playthrough. Just to see the different endings or the different choices, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's different endings. I think there are different routes you can get to the ending, but it definitely has a very good, like, it feels very Guardians-esque. This kind of just feels like playing through like two Guardians movies.
Pretty much, yeah.
Not lengthwise, because this game is close to, like, I think it's like 15 to 20 hours, depending on how thorough you are.
Yeah. And I think Brett and I were both saying that we prefer this iteration of the characters over the movies. Now, granted, this has way more time to set them up than the movies do. The movies got to be a bit more.
This is reserved with the quips in a way that, like, characters are constantly talking, but they're not constantly quipping, which is really nice.
I was so happy with that, because that's something that I've kind of come to hate recently, is that in so many things, like, just because like a couple Marvel movies did it pretty well, where they like know how to be like quippy and silly like most of the time, like now a lot of other properties are trying to do that and just kind of falling on their faces, and it's really it's super annoying, especially when you want to take something seriously, when someone's just making like, oh well the joke is that the joke that he just said is bad, and then no, it's
you can do that
joke.
like one time, right? And then it's no longer fun.
Acknowledging that what you're saying isn't funny doesn't automatically like make it funny. You have to have the right like actor, or you have to have the right person to really pull that kind of thing off. Like Mike Myers has basically made his entire career around that kind of joke, but it works because he's really good at it, and it works.
Yeah. And I was just so happy that this whole game wasn't like that kind of writing. Like, this doesn't even feel like Marvel movie writing at all, because it was just so like some certain parts of it feel so personal and genuine that, again, I same as why I was completely shocked with like that I was made to feel actual like emotion from a superhero game.
That was like
And
emotionally invested in what was going on.
it's yeah, exactly. And they do like the gameplay at points facilitates that too, because it's not like, without saying anything specific, it's not like shooting and blasting and fighting things all the time. When it wants to get more serious or
You
have
get kind of
different things
trippy.
happen, it's
There are
yeah,
moments in
yeah.
this game that are almost like Telltale-esque, where you have that
Yeah.
just a long stretch of time where you're just making dialogue decisions and things that will affect the game later on, but in the moment you're just kind of making choices as your character.
Definitely,
And
yeah.
it feels very good.
One complaint that I had heard about the dialogue, like before the game came out, this was like, early press reviews or whatever. People are saying like, yeah, like they kind of argue and bicker with each other a little too much. I did not feel that way at all. Every time they were
Same.
bickering with each other, I loved it. When
Well,
the
I think because
dialogue
you
wasn't
can
repeated.
encourage them to do that. So
It's,
I
yeah,
feel
if
like
you're-
that's
if
up
you're an
to
ass.
the choice of questions and like how you react.
But even just like when you're fighting, like outside of the dialogue decisions, like there's a lot of moments during fighting where there's just like bickering going on or something, and I didn't hate it at all, because I mean the cast does such a great job delivering really well written lines, and so I didn't really care that much because it always made me chuckle, except for, and I don't know, I think I've talked about this with you guys, but I had this problem where, oh my god, despite how much dialogue there is in this game, it would repeat constantly. It was really bad for me. I would get the same voice line like 3 or 4 times during combat sometimes.
It
For
feels
how much
like
dialogue-
combat had drastically less dialogue that could be said than every other part of the game.
Yeah, yeah. And
It's,
I
it's
think
strange though, because they'll repeat it 3 or 4 times and then I'll hear something new, like near the end of the combat encounter. And I went back to watch other people's like playthroughs of it, and I heard stuff in the same combat encounter that I didn't hear at all during when I was playing it.
I
It's
think the thing with
bizarre.
that is because that you have we've talked about it, you have different routes and there's some different choices, and it's not like you have like they're a selection of combat quotes that are just like they'll happen whenever, like whenever
There's the
Drax uses
generic
his ability.
JRPG combat callouts. basically.
Exactly, but then a lot of them like are just for certain areas and certain fights, and I feel like maybe just like in development, in writing these, like they just kind of spread themselves too thin, because they're like surprisingly unique, like quotes for
Very
specific ones. Just
contextual.
Yeah, but in a
it's-
lot
yeah,
of
they
there
just
are
end up
like
repeating a
generic
lot.
fights that don't have a lot of context, and those are the ones that I think seem to have less going on.
And for a game that relies a lot on its dialogue, when you're repeating it a lot, it gets really grating really quickly. At least it did for me, because it, again, like 4 or 5 times in one encounter is just too much.
Yeah, maybe they
Especially
didn't
if
have
it's
a
a
system in
generic
place
one
to
that
make sure
carries
that
over
didn't
into other
happen.
fights. You're like, Drax, shut up.
Stop talking. You've said this like 4 times. I am curious, off of that point, how you guys feel about huddling. So, huddling in the game is this kind of very interesting superpower mechanic where you build this
It's really
meter and then you can
unique.
put on your headphones and then get some classic 80s rock playing, and then you get your team together
As
and
long
have
as
to
you're
give
not
like a
streaming the game.
motivational speech, basically. And then if you succeed, everyone gets a buff. If you don't succeed, you still get a buff, but your teammates don't. My issue with it is it worked really well in the early fights where I actually didn't know the combat system super well, and it would come up occasionally when I was losing or something. As soon as I figured out the combat system, I only got 2 huddles for the rest of the game.
Oh
The same
my.
dialogue lines every single time.
Jeez.
I don't know if everyone else had that problem, but I only saw the same 2 huddles after a certain point, just because I would never be in a position where someone was like down
Mhm.
and the negative ones could happen. So
Yeah,
that
It
felt
did-
like a
It
bad
was a
system in
little,
some
yeah, it
ways.
was a little disappointing that the huddles repeated. My biggest problem is that I feel like the huddle to like pause right in the middle of combat went on like just a little bit too long. It's kind of like if you have like an assassination or a glory kill in like a multiplayer game or something. They're cool looking, but you want them to be like
It breaks
a
the
little,
flow.
you want them to be snappy. And so I feel like here it went on just a little bit too long.
I do wonder if they could have kept the system mostly the same, and just instead of doing the cutscene where it like brings you all together, you don't come together and you just hear dialogue lines from your party members while combat is still happening that you reply to.
There's also that suspension of disbelief for like, okay, everyone's huddling around Star-Lord and they're talking. What the heck is everyone else doing?
What's happening in this moment?
Like, if you're able to suspend your disbelief for that, like that's fine. I feel like some people that would really bother them. I kind of got used to it, although it was always in the back of my mind. It's like, you're just gonna let these guys huddle
I think
up.
the thing that got to me more was the background is always this like purple haze and not representative of what the situation you're in is.
Which is probably makes it easier.
Absolutely.
So it's not, which I was fine with personally.
There's a certain thing that that a lot of games do, especially for me, where I just like let myself get just in the game's like exactly where it wants me to be kind of thing. And this game totally did that for me, where my suspension of disbelief, I had been totally like pacified by the time that the first huddle came, because I knew it was coming, because it's one of the things that they showed off, right?
Yeah, they showed this in trailers.
And this, like, this is probably one of my favorite mechanics of the whole game, where I didn't even like. I totally get how people who maybe didn't had more like space in the amount of times that they played the game, so they had to like play it with more like breaks in between or something, and couldn't get just as used to it or something, and didn't let that affect their suspension of disbelief or whatever. I was totally sucked in. I like every single time that this happened, I was like, oh my god, hell yeah, dude. And then the choice of songs that you get afterward, like I don't even it's so cool. I don't know how they
the generic songs are really good too. Like the ones they made for the game are pretty great.
They're
that little tune that they have while you're huddling up. And there's just this like chant and this like awesome guitar riff. It sounds awesome.
It's so cool. It's so fitting. Cool. And I think just for me, the feeling of just like, because it not only reinvigorates your squad, I think it also, if you're in my position where you just let the game happen to you, I guess, it also it super pumps me up every single time. Like it's just so, even if I'm having a super easy time with the combat, and like you said, Ryan, like it's just like, we're doing so good. Don't get carried away, guys. Let's go. It's just the when the final countdown hits after that, I don't even care what was said before. I'm in, and it keeps playing for the rest of the battle. If anything, the worst part about this is that usually, because the songs are all different, when like an important cutscene happens after a combat encounter, then the music just like gets cut off. There's no like fancy way to like blur two songs together, because there's just too much different music.
I think my biggest issue with the huddling was when you're in a multi-stage fight where you'll go to like a different stage and it'll just cut off completely.
It should stay. I understand for like boss fights that have like their own unique music to start or something, then maybe that's...
But when I use it like mid-boss fight and then it cuts to show like a very brief cutscene and it goes back to the boss fight that's the same, let the music keep playing, you know?
I agree, yeah.
Keep me in that zone of Rick Astley jamming while blasting aliens. So, yeah, I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if there were more positive ones, because I really did get past the point where, like, for the second half of the game, I only had like 2 or 3 different huddles ever happen.
Yeah. I do wish there were more. That
felt bad, but the rest of it was good.
Yeah.
All right.
And I gotta say, the fact that the greatest Rickroll of all time was in the year of our Lord 2021 is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
A Rickroll that actually made me laugh and didn't make me just go.
It's great. All right. So with that, I think we've talked about most of the stuff we can talk about without spoilers. Game also looks pretty good, though it does there are noticeable issues here, especially on the PS5.
Yes, I ran it on a PS5 and I was getting very frequent frame rate drops, which I don't...
It had like frequent stutters too occasionally. Usually not in like an important moment, but certain times you just turn around and the entire game would stutter for like a second.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
I think it is a good looking game, but I think not running it, 60 FPS on a PS5 is just not great, obviously. I also had those classic weird Wyatt bugs, because of course I did.
Oh, Wyatt. I don't think you got me beat for this game. I had more bugs with Guardians of the Galaxy than I did with Cyberpunk. Legitimately.
Wow.
And I want to say none of them broke the game for me or really affected my enjoyment.
I had to restart on a couple of them.
I had to restart on, I think, 5 times. One time I got a bug. I have a video of this I need to show you guys. But I got a bug where I would exit like one of the hallways where you'd have to squeeze through, classic Uncharted style. then immediately the game would take control of my character, go back the other way, and go back through it.
That did the same thing for me. I went off
Yep,
like
the same
I went off the main path, right? And there was a chest where you could get a costume, and I really wanted it. And it was you would come out of the hallway, and it was right there, and then you would just go.
For me, it was
so
on the main
annoying, 'cause
path, so it was. I could not continue the game until I restarted with it. That was, I think, the worst bug that happened. But I also had a crash one time where just frozen crashed. And I had
for me at one point.
a lot of getting caught on geometry. I had some combat bugs where the camera would bug out. I did fall through the world at one point. So
I don't think I fell through the world. Yeah.
There's a handful of bugs here. None of them are major enough to impact enjoyment, aside from like even the ones that crash or make you restart. The game saves all the time, so it's not an issue. But it's noticeable.
Very liberal with its auto saves.
Thank God.
Yeah. I do want to put that warning out there, and I think that's probably worse on last gen consoles, would be my bet. Although I think Brett didn't have any issues.
It wasn't that I didn't have any issues. I didn't have any of the major ones. I had to restart once, but that was because of my own stupidity handling a puzzle where I just kind of screwed myself, and I think the game didn't realize it to like set me back on its own. There were because I played this on Xbox One S, and it ran like most of the time pretty fine. I mean, I wasn't expecting like incredible performance or anything because I'm playing on Xbox One. But it was I did get some of the stuttering things when like going into a new area or like turning around really fast, especially. And there were a couple times on the Milano, especially, where just like for like a fraction of a frame, just my screen would just flash bright neon green or bright neon pink, and I was just like, dude, what? I don't know what could possibly be happening with like the shaders or whatever the hell's going on to have that happen, but I don't know.
We also haven't talked about the Milano much. I feel like we should.
Well, we'll talk about that in the full spoiler.
In full spoiler. Okay.
Yeah. But I don't think the bugs were enough to make me sad.
Not really. It's disappointing. I think the most disappointing. I could have handled the bugs. It was the frame rate that was really disappointing.
Yeah.
There were times where it was like sub 30.
There are bits where they have like there's a big laser on screen or something, and the frame rate just goes to like awful for a little while.
There are times when combat can get pretty busy. There's like, sometimes like 7, 8, sometimes like 10 guys on screen, and it gets kind of nuts.
Yeah.
So I think those are the main issues, is that if you really want complicated combat, you're not going to find it here. There are going to be bugs. They haven't all been fixed, I know that for sure, but some of them hopefully have been patched out by now, but it's not a completely smooth experience, which it would be great if it was, but none of them are bad enough to make you want to restart or not play the game. With that, I think it's time for full spoilers. So let's first give our final opinions. Is this a game you think people are really going to like? Who would you recommend this to?
I think that this, this was said before, if you're looking for like super complex gameplay or like crazy difficulty, I mean, you might get it if you want to tune all the difficulty settings to their maximum, or something like that. But you might be a little disappointed.
It might not be very fun if you do that.
It might not be very fun because it's just bullet spongy at that point, right? But if you're someone who just wants a really good story and some satisfying gameplay that doesn't like demand a lot from you, but still gives you that flow state, gives you that power fantasy, makes you feel satisfied while playing, absolutely, this is a game for you. And also, if you're not a big fan of superheroes in general, or what superhero like cinematic movies and stuff has become recently, or especially other superhero games, you'll probably like this a lot, because I am not a super big fan of a lot of superhero things, and I was surprised with how much I ended up enjoying this. So I think if I am to use myself as an example, and if you find yourself agreeing with anything that I just said, you will probably like this game a lot. This is actually, in terms of things that came out this year, this is pretty up there for me in terms of how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, everything that Brett pretty much said. I'll also add that if you're just looking to play a video game, you want to sit down and you just want to play a game where there's no stupid weeklies or dailies or bad progression or tons of grinding
or crazy microtransactions.
Crazy microtransactions.
Rebalancing the meta every month.
Yep. You just want to sit down and just play a video game. I think this is probably one, at least in the AAA space, this is one of the better examples of that this year, where it's just, it's a game, you can sit down, you can play it, you can enjoy it, and it doesn't have to become your career. It doesn't become your second job or your third job or whatever.
Because this is like how I played this game was like I would do like 3-hour chunks every couple of days, and that worked really well.
I wish I had that kind of restraint.
Because I would do like a chapter or two, and then I'd come back and do another chapter or two, and it always felt like a very well paced experience going that way. So I think it's a great game for anyone that wants a game that is going to be easy to play on your own time frame.
Video game.
Yeah. It's sad to say that that's rare now, but
I know.
for AAA it is. With
It's
that,
worth the price too.
Oh yeah,
I would say it's worth the price.
absolutely.
Oh yeah,
very replayable too. If you want to have a second playthrough, you can make very different decisions and see
I'd
some
say
different
it's
stuff.
about like 14, 15 hours for a first playthrough, and then
I was closer to 20.
Explore.
Yeah, I explored a
more
lot.
if you
But closer to
explore.
20.
And
so
then
definitely depends.
and obviously that doubles it, if you play it a second time. So
and very high quality the entire time. There's no like moments here that are very boring. Which I think
the
is
story
great.
never had like a dull moment. Like the pacing was really.
And I'd add a recommendation for anyone who liked Telltale games and hasn't gotten their narrative type of fix.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great example of an approach similar to how Telltale games worked for narrative.
It's more focused
with more gameplay.
Well, compared to a Telltale game, it's more focused on gameplay than like a traditional Telltale game.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a Telltale game with like more substantive gameplay and combat that isn't like a point and click,
Yeah.
I think this finds that.
All right.
Really well.
With that, this is the official moment. If you want to play this game, which if you haven't played it, probably don't listen to the rest of this because it is a very good game. Even if you don't plan on picking it up now, great to pick it up on sale sometime. But don't listen to the rest of this because we're going to spoil everything. Literally everything. Yep. Nothing is going to be untouched. Full spoiling. All right, great. You're out. Good. Let's go ahead and jump directly into spoilers.
Oh boy.
So,
oh my god, Iron Man showed up and just blew Star-Lord's head off. It was awesome.
A lot more gore than I was expecting.
Yeah, there was viscera everywhere.
I mean, there was actually viscera in this game. So not wrong. I don't know. I gotta give props to. I think they went darker with this story than I thought they were going to, and also very personal because it was all centering around basically family relationships, even though they're not technically family, which was I think a good middle ground to draw where it's very relatable.
Also what the especially Guardians 2 kind of touches on a lot is how they're a bunch of weirdos with family trauma that then come together and become a family, which is not
they don't
most
shy
unique
away
thing in the world
from Star-Lord being a bit of a prick as well, especially in the past and having done like a lot of things that are pretty questionable and then making you deal with the fallout in the game.
They definitely have much darker backstories here than they did in the and I can't compare it to the comics because I'll be honest, I haven't read a Guardians of the Galaxy comic before, so I'm mostly comparing it to the movies, which I think more people are most familiar with anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's just similar backstories, but they go into detail more, and they're just darker overall.
Which I think works really well overall.
Yes.
Because that spectrum that you get from everyone like periodically breaking out into fights and not wanting to talk to each other and like running away and separating and not trusting each other, from going to like, oh, I just emotionally dumped everything. Sorry guys. Oh, what are you talking about? No, now we know more about you and we could be better friends now. And then they
just
all
like
get to be
literally
better
everyone
friends
on
by
this
the
team
end.
is traumatized.
Exactly. And it's not like I feel like if it was in James Gunn would probably do a better job with it, but like in your average Marvel movie, it would be like hammed up to the point where like someone who actually has like that relatable kind of trauma would probably be insulted by it. But this game does it like as realistically as you can for Guardians of the Galaxy. It does it super respectfully, and it makes all the characters feel a lot more like fully realized and realistic, like as actual people. And I was kind of blown away by it.
And I think the best decision that they made in terms of character development was actually through like the power of the main villain, which is giving you the promise, which is like your perfect reality where nothing goes wrong, and Peter gets to stay with his mom, and
especially because this is set right after a giant like galaxy spanning war.
Yeah,
that happened with the Chitauri. So you're in this setup of like everyone in the galaxy has had losses from this war. Like everyone,
which is not something that they throw in your face, but you definitely pick up on.
You pick up on it because they do a good job of the environment kind of telling the story. And then this whole villains thing of like giving you this perfect reality and promising that it can be brought, especially because the villain believes it, right? That's what sells it. This is very much like a Far Cry 5 type situation where the villains are very much believing that what they're doing is the right thing in this,
which makes them immediately more interesting. I think it's, he's not. I would have liked. I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. Goldface Raker. Thanks. I would have liked a little bit more substance with him. It's not really the He's not really the focus at all. So I'm not, really gonna complain too much. They mentioned something about a daughter, and that's why he like believes the promise so much, because he wants his daughter back, which is, it's something. But I think it's the power that he has that makes him play off of the Guardians really well, and how that messes with their trauma.
For him, I think I'm perfectly fine with him not having as much substance as some of the other characters,
it's
because
fine.
he serves as like the reason that like the villain for most of the game, Star-Lord's maybe kid, like works so well, because she's the one that like you really can't even blame for being in her position. And it's so sad, because I mean she's just a kid.
It's like a 12-year-old kid that is promised that her mother that she saw die,
I know,
can come back, and it's
right
like
in front of her eye, right there.
It's the kind of thing where I'm like, yeah, I understand why this kid would be wrapped up in this promise, because she just lost her parent and the only parent she's known. So what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah.
So I think it does a great job of playing off of that and making you empathize with the viewpoint of the villains, because to be honest, they're not really the main villain isn't revealed until like the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
You don't find the main villain, which is like something that resides in the Soul Stone, until the game is basically over.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you're dealing mostly with just like the fallout of people making poor choices, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really smart that like the main villain is this sort of like, for most of the game, is this sort of characterless, like sort of mass, right? And so they give you different people to kind of manifest the villain, right? So they give you Raker, they give you what's Star-Lord's maybe daughters? Nikki, thank you. I'm so bad with names. Oh my god.
Same. Because there's so many characters in this game.
I know.
It's hard to remember all their names.
I know. Some surprise appearances too.
Are you saying Lipless isn't your favorite character in this game?
That was a great scene. That had like nothing to do with anything, but
I do have to ask, did anyone end up killing Lipless?
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
I didn't.
Good. Gotta protect Lipless.
I was thinking about it at first, but then the moment became so incredibly wholesome that I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, you can't.
It was great. Yeah, so I think villain very good. The game is paced super well. Like that was the main thing with this, is it has not been I can't remember a recent game from like the last few years that is paced like this, where it is like constantly new stuff is happening. You're constantly visiting either new areas or returning to areas that are very different now. So you get that really good sense of like adventure and going to different places. It kind of felt like the main storyline of like a Mass Effect game in that way, of like you're always visiting a new planet and seeing weird alien things and getting this cool experience of these different environments.
And I think I think part of that is what I mentioned. Part of the reason for that is what I mentioned earlier, is that they cut out the fluff that a lot of AAA games know. There's no microtransactions, there's no like grinding for materials, there's none of that. It's just, it allows the pacing to be so much better because of that, because it's just a very directed, focused, like narrative driven experience, instead of something instead of a game that constantly focuses on slowing your progress down. It just lets the progress, handle itself.
It being more narrative too, I don't feel like sad or like upset that there wasn't really a lot of like side story content or like side missions. It's very
It's like
linear, but in
it
every
wouldn't fit anywhere in
it wouldn't
this.
fit exactly. To the point where I think it would kind of ruin it because
It's
where would it go? And if anything, just the fact that the fact that you might not like someone might miss it, it would kind of ruin parts of like the later game for them because they might miss out on whatever
Yeah.
like legitimately
And there are
important
like
character
little bits
development.
of side content, but they're all
Yeah,
like
yeah.
single conversations or smaller things that don't really.
a lot of it's on the Milano.
Yeah, a lot of it's on the
Where you get
Milano, and a
that
lot of it is
extra
on
content.
Nowhere. The first time you visit Nowhere, you have a couple of things you can do because you're not super time pressured.
Right.
But after that, the game is like constant bullet pacing to the end, where
Yeah.
there's no narrative point where you can really stop after
Right.
that.
And like, let's say they did have some side content, and let's say it was pretty good side content. It's that side quest problem that I have in an RPG or something where it's like, no, but like there's this main story that has like the ticking clock element, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of urgency, and I don't want to do a side
You
quest
need to
because like
either not do the
why
ticking
would my
clock
character do it?
or not do side content, right?
Which this
It's
game
hard
does. So it
to.
just wouldn't, even if it's good side content, it would
Yeah.
just feel weird. And it's like I don't want to do it. I want to focus on the main story.
I do think like this game does have potential. I don't know if they're gonna do DLC, but they could totally do DLC for the end of the game and have like some stuff after the main ending.
I would love
I
to
would like
see DLC handled kind of like how Spider-Man PS4
Yeah,
handled it, where it
that's what I
was
was
this
thinking.
like multi-part sort of like serialized story that you got in multiple
Just like some episodic
DLC
side
drops.
stories or build
Yeah,
up to the next
yeah.
game because like this game's
That could
gonna get
be-
a sequel,
I
right?
hope, I hope so.
It's got
It's
to.
so good.
Yep. And it's one of those games where it's like it's really good, but there's also room for improvement, like improving the gameplay,
Yeah,
especially.
I feel like the obvious thing for the sequel is probably to take a more Tales style approach to combat, where it's switching between characters and actually able to more fully interact with what's going
To be
on.
honest with you, a lot of people wanted to switch to the different characters. I'm kind of fine.
I was fine with
without
it
it,
in this game.
To be honest,
I don't think in the next game they can have Star-Lord. I think they either need to change the combat system pretty heavily or have the character swapping. Because I don't think you can do this again and have it be fun the entire time.
I don't know. It really
think-
doesn't bother me that much that it didn't swap characters, but
Well, it
The
didn't bother me in
reason-
this game, but like you have a limited lifespan of how complex this combat can get because it
unless
is
they
using
change the
you use
combat.
every button on the controller right at this point, and you lock people out. You can't use multiple abilities in a row, so you have a lot of things right now that limit the complexity of what you can do.
Mhm.
Which for a sequel, it's like they need to do something like the Batman games did, when every game has like successively either more or just different approaches to combat, but the core gameplay might stay the same, but here it's not as solid as Batman, right?
Yeah.
I do think too the puzzles could. Now I'm a fan of like really simple puzzles that are there for pacing, and here wasn't really an issue, but I do think because you have characters that can do different things to
Yeah.
the environment, they could have used them in a more like interesting way in combining everyone's abilities because
It felt like they
as
were holding themselves
pretty
back.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's there for pacing. It's very similar to like ladders in The Last of Us and stuff. So I didn't really have an issue with it because it helped with pacing. But I do think the puzzles in that they could have utilized everyone's abilities in more interesting ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think if I can just because I think this is important. If we can go back to the reason that I think you play as just Star-Lord in this game is because it's a very personal story and you touch on everyone's like trauma and past and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's very obvious that the main character is Star-Lord, is Peter Quill, because you go back into his brain multiple times, and I think being able to play as the whole Guardians of the Galaxy in this game would kind of almost take away from the feeling of
Yeah.
being Peter Quill, because
Well, that's why I do
many-
want to reiterate. I don't want it in this game.
it's yeah.
Yeah, I want to make that
I just
very
know
clear.
that other people, because I've heard the same thing of just like all like a bunch of reviewers and stuff saying like, oh, I wish you could play as everyone else. And I think I'm with both of you guys that I think that's actually absolutely fine for this game, just having it be like
Yeah.
that, because not only is this a good starting point and you can do more complex things later, but for now you have it would be weird because in conversations, if you were playing as everyone, right? In conversations or arguments when you have to like pick a side or try to calm people down, it's not it would feel less like
Yeah.
you're Peter saying these things and more like you're the player picking a choice.
Picking
Because it
the
really
option
did
you want.
feel Exactly. It really did feel like you were Peter Quill, like, trying to keep, like, your friends together
Game
and
really
trying
makes you
to
feel
Like
it
Peter
really makes you
Quill.
feel like Peter Quill.
well, because a lot of decisions you have to make are decisions you have to make as a leader, which again really ties
Yeah,
into
yeah.
it makes you feel
And
like
especially
Star.
even more so as a leader that is not respected by
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah. It's a
Which
total,
is
like,
Also, a
first,
leader
super
big
that
bro
bit of
kind
the
of
idiot.
game.
isn't very good at being a leader to
Yeah.
begin with.
Especially not at first, yeah.
Right, right.
He gets better as time goes on, but I think and if they were to do, like, a DLC or, like, another game, 'cause you can't make a sequel to this game and have, like, fewer dialogue or, like, narrative options. I feel like that would be a massive disappointment. But I feel like now you've built up the team. Now next game, I think if, like, the dialogue options be like, "Oh, this is how Drax would respond to this situation, or this is how Gamora would respond to this situation." Like, having those kind of choices and have it less being set around just Peter would make it feel
It could also
more
expand the narrative, right? Because maybe the next game
exactly, yeah.
isn't as closely personal to Peter. Maybe it's more focusing on the team as a whole and things like
Exactly.
maybe that game could involve exploration or something in less of a time limited fashion of like maybe you're trying to find a puzzle or something. So
Right.
you have the option of like you've set up the Milano, you set up all this stuff that could lend itself to like an Outer Worlds or Mass Effect style progression where you have like multiple planets you can visit and whatnot. So I think that is an option for a sequel. I don't know if they're going to go that route, and I wouldn't have a problem if they don't. But I think that they have that option on the table, and it'd be interesting to see if they do take a more squad-based RPG approach to the second one.
Totally.
We'll see.
And switching gears a little bit, and you mentioned the Milano. This game probably has my favorite use of like collectibles in any video game. Because collectibles so many times in countless games are just like, oh, here's like here you pick up an object and here's 2 sentences about it and it means nothing and you don't care. Like the classic example that always comes to mind is Call of Duty World War II, where it's like, oh, you pick up a pocket watch and it's like, this was a popular timepiece used by people in the 40s.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks.
No duh.
Gee, thanks for telling me what a pocket watch is, asshole. But no, but in this game it's great. You pick up a collectible and then you like look at it, and again, it's completely optional. You can look at it on the Milano and it launches an entire conversation with someone and you learn so much more about Gamora or Drax or whatever. And it's like that is the best use of a collectible
So cool.
I've ever seen, especially in a game that's very dialogue heavy, very much focused on the characters. That's perfect.
Oh,
And
that
now
does
I
remind
want
me,
to go
Wyatt.
out and look up
This is going to hurt your soul. I did have one other major bug. This was the worst bug I think I had. I could not pick up one of the collectibles.
No.
And I restarted the game, couldn't do
Hold
it.
on. Do you remember?
I don't know who it was. It was the one. There's one when you're fighting the lizards for the first time that show up in the like underground when you're with Mantis, and
Mantis.
you're in that underground
yeah.
with Drax being controlled. So what happened
and it's
is
like up on the ledge, right?
yeah,
Like,
it's
you
up on
kinda
the
have to
ledge.
walk up the-
So what happened is the combat auto completed. My characters all went over to the progress to the next thing, and I couldn't call anyone over to do the character things.
Oh no!
And there's no way to like avoid that combat, so I missed an entire section of that level.
Dude, this is like your Tsushima. It really is.
No, this is my Cyberpunk, right?
It is.
I'm having the Cyberpunk issues with this game.
Oh, no.
And that's the one that like legitimately bothers me because I know exactly that there is something there. I know that probably like a section of the level that I could not play because it was a sizable chunk of area that I could not go to.
Platforming something or other.
But like I couldn't. The characters just wouldn't move. They all just immediately progressed to their next thing and wouldn't come back. So it was like, well, what do I do? Yeah, that was the worst thing that I had happen because that did impact the rest of the game. But
yeah, but I mean, yeah, great use of collectibles, and then the Milano as a whole gave me such Normandy vibes from Mass Effect. Like it's the exact same like excitement of like, okay, we're back on the Normandy. I'm gonna run around and talk to everyone.
except this time, like everyone
dialogue.
actually had different conversations every time you're back there because
that
it
was
paces
the most
it so well.
exhausting thing. Yeah, because it's not, you're not traveling back and forth to places with optional content and stuff. Everyone has something new to say. The fridge door is always open.
Fridge door.
Someone,
Dude, did you close it and then someone was like, finally, someone closes the fridge door. It's open all the time. What if
did you
someone
get the one with
finally did
Mantis?
that?
Yeah, I
Did you get
did.
the one with Mantis where you close the fridge door in front of Mantis? She's like, "Wow, in this version, you really like to close the fridge door a lot."
Yeah, which is just like, no, the devs didn't just like, oh, they forgot to make sure that the fridge door closed permanently. No, they left it open the whole game so that people would close it over
Because
and over
Mantis
again.
tells you
Because it
that
gives
it's
me
open
such,
in
like,
every
bad
reality.
roommate vibes, which
Yep.
is great, especially for
yeah.
the beginning. And I wonder if you don't close the fridge door, does Mantis not say that? Or
She has
or
to
is Mantis
not
like,
Get a
say
oh,
different
that.
ending.
finally! It's like, oh, finally, you closed the fridge door.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
The toothbrush bit was really funny too, where everyone's using Star-Lord's toothbrush for different reasons.
All of them gross.
Horrible.
What was the space llama? Cammy, right?
Yeah, Cammy.
Yep.
Cammy was hilarious.
I do
so-
wonder, is
I-
Cammy not on the ship if you choose to hide the weapons instead of Cammy at the very start?
I don't know. I want
That's
to go
such
back
a-
and figure it out now.
That's such a huge loss. Imagine not having the space llama there the whole time. Because
Which-
at first I was like, oh, this is the minions, the porg of this game. They just add a stupid, cute character. No, it is
Nope.
legitimately endearing and very, very good.
And not
Helps you out when
overbearing,
Drax captures
right?
you,
Not overbearing, yeah.
which is great. I seem to remember I was looking up the cast for this game, and Cammy was voiced by the person who also voices Drax or something like that. It was so funny.
I'm not surprised. It's kind of awesome.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, that's great. I loved, all the conversations are great. All the bits where you learn crazy bits. I think Rocket's one of the first collectibles you can find. And he goes into like, yeah, so I was basically forced against my will to kill people. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
this is a good note to start the game on. So yeah, a lot of those conversations are very interesting. The Milano's a great return space. I think my only issue with it is there's a period of time where you don't go to the Milano for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
And in that period of time, you can collect a number of things to use when you get back to the Milano. But then the next time you get back to the Milano is when Drax does his insanity bit. So there's like a period of like 10 hours possibly where you just don't get any interaction on the ship. And that felt a little weird because it was just so fast paced the entire time.
Which I think says something that like these just for the whole game, like the character interactions are so good that like in place of like super complicated gameplay, I think they're the things that make you want to go to the next part. Because like even through like missions, it's never like, oh, I whatever. People are just like talking, they're saying the same thing over again. I'm just gonna just blast through this part. It's like, no, I want to take the scenic route because I know if there's like if there's a waterfall, then Rocket's gonna have something bad to say about it because he hates water, and then everyone will make fun of him because he hates water.
And then you learn that he hates water for very legitimate reasons.
Exactly.
And then everyone feels really bad.
Exactly.
And there's a whole mission, or there's a whole section of a level that's dedicated to him getting over his fear of water, and it has a really good.
And not even getting over it, but just
gameplay.
like he doesn't get over it. He just overcomes it. He just like accepts that the water probably isn't going to hurt him.
But it also plays with the gameplay too, because you are fighting yourselves while he's trying to figure this out, and you're like constantly like, hey, can you do this? And someone's like, no, I can't. And so the last eventual thing, and I tried several times like, Rocket, like get in there, and he's like, no, I can't.
Exactly. It takes multiple tries of him saying, no, I don't want to do it. And you have to keep saying it like 5 times over.
And that's what we were saying in the non-spoiler discussion, where like the game breaks its own rules for the sake of narrative sometimes. And I love when a game does that, and it does it so well here. Like the repeating segment with Peter's mom, where like everyone shows up at her house and stuff like that. That's such a creepy section.
Oh, because it sets up starting the game in that house sets up the promise bits later on so well.
It's so good.
It's such a
these
great
are things I love when games don't try to be other things. They just are games, and they know what video games can do that books or movies or comics or whatever other things cannot do. You cannot. The interactive aspects of this game are so well done. It just like it's from the simple things, just having to order your teammate that you've been ordering around this whole game to do something that he doesn't want to do, and it's not like
no.
it's just like no, you have to do it just over and over again. Then he finally does. It's like wow. It ultimately just culminates to me pressing like X or whatever like 5 times, but it's a meaningful button press. There's like actual weight behind these things. I definitely want to come back specifically to to the sections in Peter Quill's memory after whatever you're about to say, because this is a whole another tangent that I want to go on.
I think what this game understands really, really well is the idea that one of the greatest one thing that video games can do better than books and movies, in my opinion, or TV shows, is breaking its own rules for the sake of storytelling. I think it does. I think games can do that in a far more powerful way because it sets up so many rules.
Because you have to like forcibly interact with something, right? You have to use a controller and like make a decision on press a button, and if it doesn't work, you're gonna be like, wait, why isn't this working?
So when the game is actively, and I think I did a presentation about this for class a couple years ago, but when the game is actively fighting you for control over the narrative, that's when it becomes really engaging and powerful if done correctly. And this game understands that really, really well. I was so not expecting them to use that tool at all, but they use it so well. So well.
Definitely. And I think that they do the opposite too, where like closer to the end, it starts to have your teammates automatically do things for you, right? Where you don't need to order them anymore. And again, there's a specific moment.
Again, for the sake of the narrative, to show that they're becoming more cohesive.
There's also a specific moment where if past a certain point you wait around and don't order Groot to put a bridge out, Rocket will ask Groot why he doesn't do it, and then narrates that Groot says because he wants Peter to feel good about being a leader.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that was one of my favorite little moments where like I just stopped and listened to this, and Rocket was like, he's not gonna mind if you do this, and Groot was just like, I am Groot. I'm gonna wait until Peter tells me to do it, so I'm not. So he feels good about himself. Like this is the funniest thing I've heard.
I gotta refresh my memory of the Game Award 2021 nominees for Best Narrative. Is this not on it?
It might not be,
because that is okay. No, it is.
It is okay.
I was gonna say that is a crime.
I was gonna say, because I spoilers, I'm very dissatisfied with this list in the first place. So I was fully expecting it to just not be there.
Hey, you can expect to hear more about that on Sunday.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it at length.
There's your reason to come back next time, kids.
But I think now I haven't played all the games in this category, right? I think Takes Two does a decent job with this. I haven't played enough of Psychonauts 2, but yeah,
it is a stats category. All of the games are very high quality.
This category, but the whole
category is very good. But it's it just does. I haven't played a game in a long time that's used that like breaking its own rules to tell the story. I just haven't seen that done well. And
it's something that like a lot of Japanese games do, because Nier does it a lot.
Yeah. I'm sure they do.
Yakuza does it at certain points. Hey, why you just gotta play more? Play Nier.
I know. Legitimately.
I know. I played it. Okay, I played Nier Automata. Not really. I'm admitting that, Ryan. You don't have to correct me. I haven't really played Nier Automata. I kind of played it.
It's a great game.
I know.
Yeah. And I was.
Hey, Final Fantasy 14 does it. Oddly enough, it's wild.
Right. I was getting flashbacks to having played Nier for the first time earlier this year, where it was like I'm not expecting this, like what literally could have been just like the most baseline bottom, just like save the galaxy superhero dumb like American explosion screen shake lens flares cover the screen superhero story.
J.J. Abrams lens flare.
Exactly. I wasn't like expecting it to be like first of all like so aware that it is a video game, but then second of all so similar to, at least in emotion, to Nier, where not necessarily there's like twists or anything, but like honestly it felt very the the Peter Quill segments and the Promise segments felt very Evangelion-esque, where you return to the same scene over and over again, but slowly things change and things are different every time, and it's not like you realize what's going on very easily, and just the way it's executed of starting the game with Peter and his disgusting haircut. You get to look at all the posters in his room, all the stuff, and because it's a Disney game, you can actually have a little Chewbacca. That's a benefit to being owned by Disney, I guess.
And it's not just a stupid like, oh look, it's a Chewbacca Kenner toy. No, there's some like significant narrative value to it.
Chewbacca.
It's the best use of Chewbacca in anything in a long time. I can tell you that much.
I do want to take a moment here to recommend, if people want that feeling of like returning to scenes and knowing gradually more and more, play the Somnium Files, because that is a game that like one of the few games that does the same situation, where you are like literally going into essentially people's promises and returning with more information each time and doing that whole kind of process of learning more and kind of adapting to this wild scenario that I think like that is the only other game I've played that has a similar feeling thing in it, aside from like Evangelion, which isn't a game, but it's a great take on the same thing. And it's such a unique thing to see that in like a AAA space now.
It feels like such an indie thing to try to do things with their characters like that, and AAA, if anything, feels like a place where they try that and then just fall on their face horribly. But it's every single time it's so successful here because that baseline that they develop at home of it's just like Peter's, he's just a kid. He's a little bit of a douche because he's a little kid. But his mom is awesome. His mom doesn't have a bad bone in her whole body, and it makes it so much more horrible when they do. I can't say the other thing because I'm to spoil it. When they
Wait,
do
this is a spoiler discussion. You can spoil it.
No, it was for another game.
Oh, okay.
Where they put the gun in your hands, and it's like, this isn't a cutscene. You must pull the trigger on your mom. You have to do this because that's the only way. That's the symbolic way for you to overcome the fact that this isn't real. Because of course the easiest thing, this man just wants his old family back. Of course he would want to accept it, but no, you have to overcome. You have to play the rest of the game,
and he has a new family.
Yes,
he has thing too.
He has a new surrogate family.
Yeah, and the best part is that you could. They towed the line with his mom so well because you could make it so that it's really like in your face, sappy, like oh of course, like you have that character's like, oh, this character is so pure-hearted and good, you just know they're gonna die horribly, and so you can't really get connected. And I feel like they balance that really well, where it's not in your face, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, because like anyone that knows Guardians, even a little bit from the movies, knows that like Peter's critical moment is his mom dying, right?
Exactly.
So people go in knowing this, right? It's not a thing that is unknown. So they have to play up on that and make you wonder, like, okay, is it going to be cancer? Is it going to be like, what route are they going to take with this? And then it's just, nope, she gets murdered.
She just gets shot.
She gets murdered, and
by
the
aliens.
other option is you doing it yourself. And it's not just like, oh, my mom's like looking away. I gotta, here's my chance I could do it without feeling bad. It's like, no, she's looking directly into the camera and being like, exactly. She's, Peter, please stop. What are you doing? Please, I am your mom. Do not shoot your mom.
Just keep talking about it. I can't.
Yeah.
Dude, I was totally like, I was streaming it for
100%
for friends at the time. I had to mute and deafen myself because I was totally tearing up like a nerd. I was like, why? This is super okay. Why?
It was that moment. It was that moment and the moment where you're trashing the birthday party with Nikki.
Yeah.
Just brought me
hard.
right back like a non-flashback to that bit from Takes Two, Ryan. It's that exact same like, oh my god, you were dragging this out and making us do the most horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was awful.
You gotta do it. You have to do it.
You have to tear that teddy bear apart limb by limb, or stuffed elephant, excuse me, limb by limb, and then push it off a ledge and kill it right in front of your daughter.
It's rough. And yeah, I do think the ending points for this are really interesting, where you end up with like, this game has a good ending, right? It's a happy ending for most of the characters.
It has a good 2 endings.
Yeah.
There's like 3 false endings in this game.
There are. You get your victory walk back that's immediately interrupted and not a victory walk back. You get the credit interruption where the credits are going by, and then guess what? Nope, surprise boss fight.
Did you guys notice in the credits it would names would occasionally flash?
Magus.
Was it Magus? Yep.
I
was like, wait a minute.
Huh.
Oh, that's kind of weird.
This feels a little weird.
That's a lot of one guy. Huh. He did a lot of work on this game. What a cool dude.
Dude, Magus, what a legend.
He's up there with Kojima, man. Wow, he did so much work.
And I do think Magus worked very well as like, this is after the emotional climax of the game, right? Because the emotional climax is saving Nikki and going through that, her promise, and making sure that she's all right? And then you get to the end where you're like, okay, now you just get to beat up a purely evil thing.
Right? Yeah. it feels it legitimately. It's not even like a JRPG boss fight. It's literally like Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The background is space. You are standing on space, and there's just big muscle man leaning over you.
Big
the
space
whole time.
muscle man.
Exactly.
I will say, I think I said this when I was fighting the final boss. I was a little disappointed that the final boss was like throwing minions at you and less fighting the actual boss, which isn't like the biggest issue in the world, but there's always
It felt like there
for
was
me,
more
there's always
opportunity there for.
there's always a disconnect between. It's like that Destiny boss problem where they just
Because I still think
kind of throw people
fighting
at you
like
instead
a
of-
quote unquote space god is a very common thing in a lot of Japanese games. Again, and I think the best
It doesn't really
take
feel
on
like
it,
you're fighting a space god.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is I think the best take on it I've seen is the original Bayonetta has an infight where you're fighting like a weird cosmic being. And that is one of the most impactful cosmic being fights I've seen, because it does a really good job of making you like realize the scale of what you're fighting and having to move along it and whatnot. And right here, they keep coming up in Guardians with like this, oh, he's super big, you can't get close enough to use this, right? So you got to get him close, but that creates this whole thing where like you don't have anything interesting to really do during the fight aside from
I'm
kill
fine
ads.
I'm fine with like ads being in a boss fight if they're not the primary like. If it's kind of like an if it's kind of like a medium between like the different phases of the boss fight to like give you some health back and ammo or something like that, that's fine. But it shouldn't be like the focus of the boss fight, in my opinion.
And I think that comes down to just combat's not very complicated, and even the bosses that do have like, oh, you got to target this specific part or like do.
They
this
would probably have
specific
had
thing.
to devolve into QTEs to get it to work.
I feel like combat was at its best when there were other environmental things going on. Like I think one of my favorite fights in the entire game was near the end where you're trying to like I forget, you were trying to like do something with Nikki where these different like buttons would pop up and you have to come up and like destroy the power cable thing that was like connected to Nikki or something.
I felt like
and
a
it was
good
this
Destiny
large,
raid.
Yeah, it was this large fight where there were other environmental things going on. There were different like platforms shooting up everywhere, and you had to focus your fire on specific spots and stuff. It gave you a lot to do
because you were
without
moving
being really
around, right?
difficult.
You had a lot of movement to do. Your party was all over the place, so you had a very good sense of like scale of what was going on. So
I do also
really
think
well.
the best boss fight in my opinion was Fing Fang Foom,
Easily.
and then all the boss fights after that just didn't feel
because Fing Fang Foom feels
awesome.
like a classic video game boss, right? It is giant dragon that you're fighting. It's got very telegraphed attacks, but they're easy.
And it was awesome
using
the Guardians to like set up the ice like trebuchet basically to like throw ice chunks at it. It was really cool.
And I do think that gets to like my one. I think the worst thing in the gameplay right now is the element shots just feel weird, right? None of them
even talked about those yet.
Well, because they're such a non-thing, right? they don't.
It felt a little arbitrary.
They felt arbitrary. They didn't feel useful. What I would love to see, I think if they want to stick with Peter as the main character for the next one and not have switching characters, turn those into fighting stances, right? And give each one like different mechanics to deal with. I feel like that's how you make that more interesting instead of just being special attacks that you like load ammo in and then use.
Or have them functionally be very different. So like the ice is like a submachine gun type of thing, and the fire is like a.
Well, give me a reason to use them, right? Because as of right now, the only reason to use them is an enemy shows up with like a colored shield that is weak to it.
That's what I'm saying. It's like if they feel like different weapons, it feels like you have a bigger like arsenal of weapons than just your two pistols. So like if they
but none of them feel
function
different.
very differently. Again, like you have a fire shotgun or an ice submachine gun, it would be fun to kind of mix those up and something like that instead of just having the two,
especially because they look like it, right? Like the wind one looks like a crossbow that you pull out. Give me something weird with that where I can like charge a shot that does some crazy thing.
Was probably my favorite because it had functionality outside of specific enemies.
Yeah, like the pulling of the enemies too was good.
It was really fun to pull someone in and then melee them, and then you could time it so where like your last melee attack like gives you more health or whatever that upgrade was. I'm trying to remember.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Like there was a little bit of like, oh, okay, I can use this outside of just a color-coded enemy. They needed to have a lot more of that.
I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for those to be where you get more complexity, and you just don't get it here because they're set up as like big story things when they happen, and then nothing really comes out of it. At least in this game, which I'm sure that is probably potential sequel hook for going into the whole Celestial stuff of like the comics and the movies. But in this game, they felt inconsequential, and it would be cool to see more done with that.
Especially because they focus so much on when you get a new elemental upgrade. Like they clearly wanted
they
it
feel
to
like
be a
there's
big
supposed to be
deal.
gravitas there, right? Like it's supposed to be an important thing, and they just don't do a whole lot. I think my other minor issue, this one is a lot more minor, of like I don't think this was necessarily a problem. How do you guys feel about Nikki recovering so quickly in the end and becoming and going Super Saiyan?
Super Saiyan hair was really funny. That like made me laugh out loud.
See, I don't know if they wanted us to laugh. Because I did the same thing.
Yeah,
it happened, and I was just like, "This is a little much."
I didn't feel like it was weird. There was another thing that felt strange for me. And the story was where, because I don't know what about it. I thought the Nikki thing was fine. I just didn't know the name.
I think I would have wished for a little bit more setup of like, this is gonna give you magic powers. All right.
Yeah.
Like what's going on here? And then they don't address it because the game ends. Right.
Yeah.
So
wait, did they say why? I don't even remember why Nikki got powers.
She was plugged into the magic thing, I guess.
Some residual magic thing, probably.
There's no explanation for how that happened.
It
felt
probably,
like,
and especially how her entire outfit changes to be a different, weird
It was very
Evangelion
weird.
plug suit, and then you have like her hair suddenly gets an undercut on both sides.
To say that it came out of nowhere is an understatement.
Right after you've learned that she's now accepted that her mother's dying and is probably grieving, and I'm just like,
I feel like, I wonder if it came down to like, okay, we're about to fight this like evil space god. We need another space god like level character to help them out because they can't do it on their own.
But they have that, right? They have Star-Lord with the whole Celestial thing. If you wanted to hook into a sequel, you could do that, right?
Yeah.
So it felt out of nowhere where Nikki was just suddenly okay, and that to me was very abrupt.
I'm fine now, and now I can shoot things out my hands.
It didn't actively bother me, but that is the one moment where this felt like a Marvel movie, where like something just happened and the character was fine.
It felt like it kind of reminded me of the moment, like if you want to talk about like a giant clusterfuck in like a Marvel movie, it's like Age of Ultron, the moment where in one scene, like Thor comes in, brings Vision to life, and then quickly explains the Infinity Stones. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
We just get a lot of buildup that probably needed to happen.
Yeah. That was a moment where the one moment we're like, wait, what?
And maybe it could be that Nikki's a character from the comics. I'm sure she probably is.
Probably.
We just don't know about her. And that probably made more sense to people because like they also had Ruby Thursday or something show up as well, where I was like, who is this person that's here for like a one-off that seems important but isn't?
Yeah. Fin Fang Foom was from the comics too.
Fin Fang Foom isn't Fin Fang Foom the American Dragon?
I
think he is.
Remember.
I think he is because isn't the like backstory of American Dragon that Fin Fang Foom inhabited a statue that looked like a Chinese dragon, and becomes, I think that's right. I might be insane.
It's almost like these comic books are really stupid.
How could you?
I don't know if this is real or not. It is the thing where like he looked like a Chinese dragon from doing that. Yeah, it is that he looked like a Chinese dragon because he inhabited a statue of a Chinese dragon. So
it's extremely stupid.
It's super funny to me. So Brett, what was the moment that was bothering you?
The thing that bothered me most is because we managed to touch on all the characters by the end have their like emotional like, okay, we're part of a family now, we're part of a really cool close knit team. The only person that I really feel like I didn't get that as much with, because we didn't end up going into her head, was Gamora, because she talks about her the whole like Thanos thing. Like that's probably one of the most talked about ones aside from Rockets and Groot. We also don't go into his head, but I mean,
but Groot is Groot, right? Like we don't need to go super far into Groot's head, because going into Rocket's head is going into Groot's head essentially.
Exactly, yeah, they go hand in hand. But I was especially really looking forward to her like arc of turning around and being a friend, because she's like the biggest opportunity for like potential love interest. Like in the movies, they do a really good job with her like character. There's just so much potential for like story stuff to happen. I was really like waiting for the moment where we get to like see her like have that turnaround from like being like a snarky asshole to Peter Quill sometimes to just being like a nicer person to him. But instead we just kind of get like we talk about it while we're going through nowhere, and then after a fight she's just kind of like, okay guys, yeah, that's what happened, and then everyone's like, oh really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Especially
And
when
then
you
she
get
gets her
whole
special
levels
ability.
like dedicated to Drax and stuff
Exactly,
like
because
that.
Drax's was so good. It
Yep.
was so good.
It also feels
I
like
wanted
I
another
think
one for
Gamora's collectibles are the ones that are most closely placed to the path too. I feel like I found those before I found everyone else's relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And yet none of them really went that detailed into anything.
I wonder if they were relying on the collectibles to kind of tell that story.
I wonder, because it does feel like if you hadn't found them, you wouldn't know a lot of her backstory in a different way from like Rocket and whatnot, where you still find out about Rocket's stuff. You obviously like literally go into Drax's deal while going through the game, so it feels like a lot of her stuff was relegated to that. And I wonder if they want to set her up for something more in the next game, and so gave her less focus
Same
here.
with Nikki, yeah, both of them I could see.
I was wondering the entire game, are we going to get a romance between Gamora and?
Oh, no way.
No, yeah.
No, because this game had Carell in it, right? So you're not going to do a romance in a game centered around Star-Lord dealing with his maybe daughter.
Yeah, that would be really
that would
awkward.
be really weird.
No, it would be. Well, but I mean, before I knew that was kind of the central like focus of the story, I was wondering. I do feel like it's gonna.
There's a decent job of Star-Lord not coming off as a creepy prick to Gamora too.
Yeah,
I feel like it's still a little bit of creepy prick energy, which is what you want with Star-Lord, but nothing that was like too insane.
I will say I was worried at first for Gamora's character because her introduction, she's like sitting at the in the captain's chair, right? And the camera does this weird like lingering thing where it goes like from her legs.
It does the
like,
Miranda thing from Mass Effect.
Yeah, and I was wondering like, is that supposed to be from like, is that just a camera shot or is that supposed to be like Star-Lord checking Gamora out or something? And it doesn't really do that for the rest of the game. It was just that one moment. It was really weird.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I don't want the whole game to be like this. And then it wasn't. Thank God
it's not,
because that would have been so obnoxious.
I also do want to say I love Gamora's outfit in this game compared to all the other media she's in. Of like she had this cool looking unique armor.
Mm-hmm. It's my favorite out of every like design that I've seen. It's my favorite Rocket and Groot outfits.
I love Rocket's like soul patch braid.
Yep, and he also has a little like baby Groot bead on it too, which is really cute.
In general, even because I know we were talking about this before the game came out about how this Star-Lord feels a lot like just like bootleg Marvel MCU Star-Lord, and I think after playing the game, I've just gained enough respect for him that I completely no longer feel that way.
I definitely felt that way at the start, but not anymore.
It's through the whole game, he does a good enough job separating himself, and I think honestly, with the way that he acts, I kind of like even because Wyatt said this earlier, but even just in a real life sense, I preferred this man's mocap compared to Chris Pratt, because Chris Pratt, when he's acting, usually just like has the same face most of the time.
Which it works for Star-Lord, but
it's
it works in a 2-hour movie, right? But if you're spending like 10 to 20 hours with a character in a game, it would be a little bit old.
It did also take me a minute. I didn't like the voice actor's voice. He sounded very like meathead, like
he sounded very
frat,
bro-y,
like frat bro. Exactly. Guys, huddle up.
What are we doing? Come on, people. Jeez.
Laugh in the face of danger.
I thought it fit so well.
It grew on me. It grew on me a lot over the course of the game.
I didn't like it at first because it was an immediate like knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, I don't like it. And then it kind of grew on me. Like the more bumbling he is,
because he kind of always sounds exasperated, right? Like he's always a little bit out of his depth.
As the leader
of
the Guardians fits perfectly.
Yeah,
I think it ended up working well. My only this is a nitpick that I don't even think anyone else is going to share. I think his jacket looks a little dumb.
Just because
I like most of the jacket, but then he's got like shoulder pads that are super thick and like jutting up. the arm pieces that are like bolted on the side.
Jacket, yeah.
They felt like it was a little bit bulked out in a way that just looked weird.
I also love how they contextualize, like, he calls himself Star-Lord because it's his favorite, like, band.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I love that little touch because, again, it's yet another connection to his mom, which just makes everything as he's a kid just, like, more... I was shocked that they started the game as him, like, as a kid, just listening to music and looking at, like, magazines on his bed.
Yeah.
It's a very bold way to start.
I mean, but after having played it, like, I wouldn't start it any other way,
game.
right?
No, it was perfect.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
I was like, when I saw it, I was like, oh. That was like the first sign of like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a good story.
Yeah, all right,
like,
I'm in.
Like they're taking it seriously.
Especially when I then took like 20 minutes just looking around the room at all the detail they put.
That's the other thing I want, just the tiny little details and like personal touches. Like I wanted to say this like about the Milano as well. Again, with the toothbrush was really funny. The fridge door, just the amount of dialogue that you can hear between the other Guardians as you're just walking around, which was great. And I just wanted to stop and like just listen to what they were saying. Or like they let you play the music, they let you play the soundtrack as you're walking around. The first thing I do whenever I go back to the Milano is just walk over to that little console and then pick a song that I haven't heard in a while. And it's like, okay, we're kind of like calming down from a fight. I'm gonna play like "Don't Fear the Reaper" or something like that, like a calmer track. Or if like we're heading towards something, I'm gonna play like Pat Benatar or something like that, and really pump us up.
All right, I do want to ask. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I was gonna say this might be what you were bringing up or eventually or something, but I do want to say there's another whole thing that we forgot about is that there's like 3 Star Fox segments in this game.
There are.
Oh yeah.
That, like, I was super worried because like reviewers that I saw were like, these control terribly, you're gonna hate them.
That's fine.
I loved them. They were awesome.
I liked the second and third. The second and third worked pretty well. The first one was very stiff because like there wasn't anything you could really do in it.
It's it was like just Death Star 2 run escape from like the Lego Star Wars games, pretty much, where you just straight line like dodge the debris and stuff. But it was playing Flock of Seagulls. I ran, so I was totally like, it's simple. I don't care. I'm in. We're getting the hell out of here.
I kind of wish there was one more in the game.
If you want me to like something,
I wish there was more too.
80s, dude. Play 80s like pop songs, and you got me to like something a lot more. Like
it's very easy.
I'm a simple man. I hear 80s pop music. And I get happy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That Guardians has done so well as a property in the first place, one might even say.
I mean, they chose a great soundtrack for this too. All the songs are very great when they come up. When you get the final countdown playing, and it's just like, having a great time.
Yep.
Good.
It's excellent.
Yep. And then I would say in terms of like the Star Fox sections, I think the second one is like a good like gameplay segment. Right? In terms of gameplay, that's the best one. And then the third one just had scale. You got Lady Hellbender flying around on Fing Fang Foom and all this crazy other. You've got Mantis flying around in the Milano, just crashing into everything. Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. I've said this before, I love moments in games and movies where you've met a ton of characters along the way and then they all like come together at the end, right? Which is why, oh God, Rise of Skywalker did that so poorly.
Let's not talk about Rise of Skywalker.
Not a Star Wars podcast. Not a Star Wars podcast, please.
Never again.
But yeah, I think specifically, I would have loved to see more of like the second one where you had actual like dogfights going on, because that to me felt good. That was the one that felt very free because the camera wasn't locked onto anything. I had a space that I could actually move around in. It wasn't forcing me to like go in a specific direction. You had like full movement control. That felt good, and I would love to see like an approach of doing that in a sequel that is a little bit more open.
I would like to see more of those sections too. I feel like they wanted to play it safe because they didn't really know how well it was going to go over, and I get that. And they mostly wanted to focus on the core gameplay, but it was good enough where some improvements here and there for a sequel. I want to see more of them. Like maybe
they just tighten up the controls a bit. It could be great in a sequel,
and even like tie it into the ground sections a little bit more and have some interesting, like maybe 2 people are in the ship. If you want to do the whole thing of like switching between different characters, some people are on a planet or something doing something, and then you can switch to the other 2 people in the Milano to like help them out or something. Like that could be really interesting.
that thing that everyone wanted from Destiny when that was first coming out. Like, oh, what do you mean I can't actually fly my ship between planet to planet? Like, just give me a little like, oh, there's asteroids in front of us. Oh no, I guess we have a little gummy ship segment to.
I can't think
to
of
just
another
put us
video
between the two
game
areas.
that allows you to customize your loading screen.
I know.
All right. Yeah, I think that they were overall pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
Anything else that you guys want to bring up to talk about story-wise? What I do want to ask is, what I was going to say earlier, did anyone make any decisions they think that other people did not make? That we want to see if things were very different. I'm curious, who did everyone take to Hellbender at the start?
I took Groot.
I also took Groot.
I took Rocket. All right.
Yeah.
So how did that go for you? Did you guys get the breakdown with Rocket?
Did not go well.
It was because I watched I was actually watching Cameron play it when he was playing this, and he also chose Rocket, so I got to see both of the different missions. It seems like the Rocket route was way harder and had a lot more like a gameplay thing. Yeah, because for Groot it was just like it was more, it ended up being like kind of more puzzly and like exploring the place and trying to figure out like what cell is he in,
so you had to actually do like a prison break.
It's we
because with Rocket you don't do a prison break. Rocket immediately devolves the situation into shooting.
Yes, he just gets very mad
because Hellbender doesn't think he's that mean. And then he gets upset,
and he's offended,
and starts pulling guns out. All right, I'm glad to see that mission actually does change significantly, because I was wondering, because I can see with Groot the same thing happening, where Rocket could totally have started like just a crazy new fight. In the same path because Groot's his friend, so I could see that playing out the same way either way. But it's nice to see it's different.
It's very interesting, and I don't know. I actually don't know what leads up to this in the like what the equivalent is in the Rocket route. But for it, like you prison break, quote Groot out, and then he ends up leading you the wrong way because it's just a shape-shifting creature that looks like Groot, and then the real Groot is just like standing next to Lady Hellbender the whole time, and he's just like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And then
Hellbender's like, "You really think you could pull a fast one on me? These creatures are legendarily horrible at keeping secrets and telling lies."
So I don't know if there's even like the shape-shifting thing at all in Rocket's route, or if he just like
no shape-shifting thing to my knowledge.
There you go.
That's crazy.
You would eventually just get up to the octopus boss fight just by trying to find a way out. So
nice.
Yeah, good to see that's different.
I did want to bring up one thing. It's somewhat related to like repeating dialogue before we end the discussion. But one issue that I had, I think I've talked about this with you guys, is there were so many moments where like dialogue would just run into each other, and they would like cancel one dialogue to start another one. And what it screams to me as someone who made a very narrative heavy game not too long ago, I think the problem is they didn't scope out their levels to the amount of dialogue that they have.
Well, it's clear they tried in some areas, so I wonder if they just kept adding more, right?
Like after the levels were...
Yeah, that's what I wonder, is if things kept getting added, because the levels are so tightly made that it feels like they would not be easy to change.
It definitely felt like there was more dialogue than there was level,
so
to speak. And it was disappointing because the dialogue is so good, and I wanted to hear it. So anytime it would like get interrupted by something, I got a little angry because
it also made me get to the point where like I just wouldn't move on until they stopped talking.
I would slowly walk or like stop eventually if I thought it was going to trigger something.
It was also a noticeable problem because there are some areas where you don't know what's going to trigger the next dialogue. So you have to be very cautious of like going through a doorway because you don't know when it's going to suddenly cut you off and start the
and
next
then if
dialogue.
You don't time it correctly, there's just a lot of just silence because they expected you to keep going. It's especially with a game that's this narrative heavy and dialogue and lots of good dialogue. It was frustrating. Definitely.
Definitely, I agree. The other thing I wanted to know is, did everyone let Gamora go fight Raker? Or did they go with Gamora?
I didn't go with Gamora. I let her go.
Okay, so we all let her go. I did not know until after that there was an option to go with Gamora.
I didn't know that was a thing.
So apparently you could just leave and go up the path with her. I just never tried, so I didn't know it was a thing you could do.
Yeah.
And then I got like, she showed up later with Raker's arm and was like, "Hey, I did this."
Yeah. Because
So
it wasn't
like
even
a
like,
mini boss fight with Raker or something like that.
I don't know because I didn't do it. So
damn.
I have to wonder. That's one of those decisions I got to change when I eventually play it again.
I will also say, speaking of Raker, I was not. I before I realized that Magus was like the actual final boss, I was like, this is the final boss against Raker. This is really lame. Like, I did not like his boss fight at all. It was a lot of like,
it felt
waiting.
weird.
There was a lot of waiting and then fighting other people and just waiting for him to open up. No, there wasn't any other like people to fight during his boss fight. You're just focusing on him, and he just flies around a lot, and it was really.
And he also had, at least in the difficulty I played on, he was the only boss that had like 1 or 2 insta kill moves.
Yeah,
he would just do a thing that you can't really see because he makes the screen go black, and then he just suddenly appears and kills you. I'm like, this doesn't feel very well put together.
I'm very glad that wasn't the final boss fight, because I was like, that was a terrible way to end it if that's the final
it wasn't
boss
nearly as
fight.
exciting as it could have been.
So thank God for Magus.
Magus I think was also not the best boss fight.
It was better.
Boom was definitely the best, but
it was
it was more cinematic and it had less crazy. It had less crazy like inane stuff than Raker did of just having to wait for him to be open.
Even the scale of the fight was more fun. Like, that's half of what made Fing Fang Foom's fight so much fun. Is there's just massive scale and there's a lot of running around,
things falling. Like it's also like a beautiful planet.
And you actually had the opportunity to, when you're fighting Magus, have the little dialogue bits in between. That's the fight I really wish your music would have kept playing the whole time. Because that's the one where I started in the fight and did the huddle immediately and got Rick Astley playing and was jamming to that during the final boss, and then immediately cut off as soon as the first dialogue happened.
I was thinking, like, when I huddled up during the final boss, it's like, okay, I either want Rick Astley or I want Final Countdown. Those are the two that I want. And then I got Rick Astley. And I was
just like, that's how we gotta end this game.
Baby. It was
perfect
so
ending.
I also, and I think why I mentioned this, I'm also a huge fan of like just what I like to call the friendship beam, or like all the characters that you met coming at the end for like one big attack.
The friends you made along the way.
Exactly.
100%.
But like not a meme.
Yes. And it's granted, it was like quick time event. What I'm realizing is that a lot of things that people complain about can be done well in ways that you don't complain about them, because I don't think the quick time events in this game, you could turn them off.
Dude, I kept seeing people complain about the QuickTime events in this game. They weren't bad.
No, they were fine.
I don't know. I saw like multiple reviewers say like, "Oh, we're taking a point away because there are QuickTime events." I'm like, "What?"
You can turn it off if you don't like them. It's so dumb. But it's gonna sound so weird because it's like, oh, you finish it with a QuickTime event, but it's like Gamora hits the little crystal thing with her sword, and like it's all bouncing between all the characters, and all of them are their like same buttons,
and they're they're very generous on the timing.
They're so lenient,
So I'm
just another thing that you can change if you still want them.
I don't know if you had a problem with that fight. I think that's on you, not the game.
You could have easily fixed it for yourself, and the game tells you like that. They put those menus in your face at the start of the game. If you don't like QuickTime events, it's in big white letters on a bright pink screen. You can get rid of it yourself. But I thought that was super satisfying. A very like easy way to just like each button that corresponds to your party member, press it in the right like time or whatever, and they all help you get the crystal to the right spot in the end. Final Countdown's playing. It was so satisfying. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I definitely thought that was really fun. They also did a good job of setting up that Quill did not get fried by the crystal.
Yes,
it hurt him, but it didn't fry him.
Which is a nice little tease, probably into a sequel.
And I'm curious.
Focus on his.
I do wonder if they do a sequel, how much Adam Warlock is going to be involved.
Adam Warlock was awesome
because I think he's great.
So much.
He's a great kind of foil for Quill because he's just like so sure of himself.
Whoever was writing dialogue for him really got to flex his dictionary that he probably had.
Like, I also kind of want to see Adam Warlock with a golden beard again, because I gotta say he rocked that look. That was it was a good awesome look for him.
Well, dude, again, a surprise appearance. Like, it makes perfect sense why he's there, but it was a complete surprise, which was nice.
Homie just comes out, just looking like straight up, just golden Bryan Danielson, just like fully lumberjacked out in like space jeans.
He looks like if the Oscars award just like came to life.
Yes, exactly.
It was great.
I also love the way he talks. It
was a
it's
lot
so
of fun.
like I don't know how you even do that. My brain is simply not large enough to understand how Shakespeare.
I also love that
a
Mantis
lot of work went into his dialogue, and it was totally.
I think he and Mantis had great writing, where Mantis just sounds like spaced out of her mind all the time, which like her VA did an incredible job.
That's such a great character quirk where she can see every single reality playing at once, but she can't help you because she can't remember which one she's seeing.
Exactly, and it doesn't. It almost sounds like she doesn't even care half the time, which is just amazing.
Well, because she knows there's a reality where it works, so who cares?
Exactly.
She has the biggest snapback to reality than anyone because she realizes that we're just this tiny, insignificant little like puddle in this grander like multiverse thing. I wonder. That's the other thing. Are they going to bring like multiverse stuff into it, like and have Mantis more involved? That could get pretty.
They touched on it with the place that you're like riding in on the big hand, and they just like
the Cosmo
Avengers
stuff.
Assemble, and then Star-Lord's like, "Event? That sounds stupid. Who would ever make that? That's so dumb." It's like
I do hope they don't do an Avengers crossover. I sincerely hope they don't do an Avengers crossover.
Please God,
oh God,
that's not gonna go over well if they do.
Spider-Man PS4 crossover though.
Tie those games together, not
sweet.
not Avengers in this. Oh man.
But you know, if they tie those games together, it's gonna be Sony exclusive because Spider-Man's in it.
Yeah, that is the problem. Oh, poor Spider-Man. All right. With that, I think we've mostly talked about everything that we wanted to do. Anything else that people want to bring up? I think
we did talk about the soundtrack, but I don't want to discredit the score at all.
Yeah, it's also very good.
Any bit of like pieces of music that was made for the game, I thought was actually a lot of fun. Again, that huddle up music where it's got like, it's got some like echoing claps. It's got this awesome guitar riff. The chanting sounded great. But all the combat music when it wasn't huddle up music was great.
Yeah.
And I think also, I feel like we always end up leaving sound to the last little bit in all of these that we do. But the voice actors, just in general, I don't think there was a bad.
They nailed it.
Decision at all.
Voice acting was great all
single
around.
person nailed it.
They did for the characters like Groot and Drax, and to a degree Rocket, where like they kind of like can't sound different than the MCU versions, otherwise it would be weird. Like they did such a good job. Drax is hilarious. He's easily the funniest character. It's amazing. Gamora's, Peter Quill's, all like the Nikki especially. I'm like we've come so far in voice acting where children are now no longer acted by actual children that cannot act, and we have actual people that cannot sound like an old lady voicing a child for some reason.
This doesn't have the like anime voice problem.
Yeah, thank God.
Which is very nice. Weird. Yeah, voice acting great all around. Score was great. The visuals are generally very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think there are some areas where it's more noticeable.
That first planet you go to with all the purple everywhere was so pretty. Oh my God. That was
very
fantastic.
imaginative.
I remember thinking this when they first showed that, like, which I think we should touch on after this. That first like straight 20 minutes of pure, just unadulterated gameplay when they first showed the game for the first time. Every single planet has that thing that I wish things like Halo and Destiny had, and so many other games where they have great concept art, but then it has to get gamified, so it just becomes more just like normal planet looking. These planets had like those crazy, like weird repeating shapes going on for miles and miles, and like super weird plants and colors.
They had the lightning storm with these weird moss trees that's happening.
It's like when you luck out on a really cool No Man's Sky planet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have the ice planet that Fin Fang Foom is on with all just the raining rectangles. Why? I don't care. They look awesome, and it's an alien planet, so it works. Like more games need to do that, where they concept artists all over the place have like. Because it's concept art. You can just do that. Everyone that is a concept artist for environments has made environments that look like this. It's just when they get into the game or the movie, they don't look like that anymore.
When you let your artists just do their thing, like, damn. You can get
it's almost like they get paid for it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
like,
also, I think the linearity
God
helped with that. Where like these worlds not needing to be an open world adds a lot to where you can create these segmented pathways that work one way only, and then have all these different types of interactables and whatnot. And the environment just doing weird things. It's great.
If someone were to ask me what my favorite kind of game is, right, like genre or something like that, it's this like narrative heavy third person action game that's like very linear but offers a little bit of like exploration for collectibles or whatever, like,
and replayability, right? Because you can
and replayability
this.
Like it's a very like, it feels like a very Sony game, even though it's
not
a Sony game.
Yeah, definitely.
Third person narrative, like often dealing with like two characters or a group of characters or something. That's like, it's the reason I love Sony exclusives so much, is that that's like my favorite type of game, is the Sony game. So I was already probably gonna like this game anyways.
I think most of us had that feeling again because we're definitely reaching the end here. From that advertising thing, that's first thing that they showed of the game, that is how no one's ever going to do it again, because the game industry is just stupid.
Well, it's because they don't like showing off products that are ready to ship, right? They tend to do the thing where they show things way too early.
It shows a lot of confidence when, like, this is the first time we're announcing the game. Here's like 15 minutes of gameplay. Boom! Like,
this is how good it looks.
And it wasn't stupid made up like E3 footage. That was actual gameplay. What you saw, you will actually play. Like, right down to the visuals and the features and everything.
It was 1-to-1. Like, going through those areas, it was like, oh, this is the area from that trailer. And it wasn't like, oh, but now this is changed. Like, oh, they clearly had better graphics here or whatever. It's like, no.
Oh my god, what happened to this puddle?
Ooh, Watch Dogs. But like, it's like, I don't know. More games. You want to look at
the perfect
we need the shadow drop more often.
If you look at the perfect, if you ever want to look at the perfect way to market, especially a AAA video game, that's how you do it. Less than a year from launch, you show gameplay right off the bat. You're super clear for the first time. You're super clear about like content and what type of game it is and like monetization and all that. You're just super upfront about it. And then you drop little bits of story. And they even had cool like, oh, this is like a little video we're putting out just talking about character design. And like and like going into like, oh, what we pick and chose from the movies versus the comics, and like how we're creating our own unique like rocket or whatever. Like, such perfect like build up to launch. And it wasn't, for the most part, a giant technical disaster that kind of
it's just it needs more polish, and that's it. It's just so many.
It's an anomaly.
It shows, not only I think even more than confidence, it shows restraint, because we talked about this literally yesterday as the day of recording, where it's if Battlefield 2042 and so many games that come out didn't make all these promises that feasibly they could have lived up to, it's just that they didn't. If you don't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it. It's a Halo podcast, baby. It's legitimately though, because this game, there was no leakers or people probably knew about it, and that's fine. There's nothing you do about that. You're always going to get that no matter what. But there was no big like, hey, everybody, we're gonna have the most open, narrative heavy, and
times the detail
open world Guardians of the Galaxy game with more exploration than you can possibly imagine,
more inane side quests than you could ever complete,
industry leading spaceship combat,
more graphical fidelity than you could possibly imagine.
Guess what? Star Citizen, that's actually a Guardians of the Galaxy game.
None of that was thrown around, and like none of those expectations were built up for this, and so as a result, the game just came out.
They just said it as it was good. They just said it as it was. No, it's another. I mean, I've talked about this too, but that's one of the things that made a 001 favorite Ghost of Tsushima such a success, is because they knew where to have restraint in an open world game.
Yes.
I also want to give credit to think way back Bethesda when Fallout 4 was announced and coming out 6 months later, right?
Yeah.
Imagine the hype levels for that were insane. Maybe the game didn't fully deliver, but at least people had fun with it, right? And sometimes doing that prevents that huge analytical backlash you'd get from 2 years of people putting expectations on your product, right? Because right now, there is no way Elder Scrolls 6 is going to deliver. It doesn't matter if the game is great, right? It can't deliver on the expectations that have been set because of this. So
Yeah.
it's the sort of thing where, like, man, I wish Starfield was announced 6 months from release, right?
I was just gonna say, because they made a different kind of mistake with that game where, like, sure, we don't know what the game is yet, so there's no real expectations.
We're gonna show you a
to
PNG for 4
Exactly.
years.
There's no expectations, but there's also very little excitement, right?
Exactly, because you just don't know what it is, and it's been how many years? It's been years.
It's been like a year and a half, I think.
Cyberpunk could have had the
so long.
smoothest launch in video game history, and it still wouldn't have lived up to 7 years worth of insane hype.
Exactly. Yeah.
Star Citizen isn't either.
And guess what? Sometimes you can just make a game and come out with it and get like huge sales numbers like Guardians has, have a huge amount of success, have near universal praise for it being a great game. Guess what? You just need to make a good game.
Also, it was announced like in a weird time for Marvel games because because on the surface it looked really similar to Avengers, which has just been a giant
Well, it didn't
joke.
look super similar. It was just like, no matter what, coming out as the next Marvel game after Avengers.
Well, see, you say that, but I can't tell you how many people I've either read on, like, Reddit.
I mean, they're wrong, right?
People, like, no. But that's what I'm saying is that, like, the general perception, at least it seemed like to me, is that, like, oh, it's just going to be another Avengers thing. But obviously they weren't paying attention. But that's besides the point. The general perception was, oh God, it's going to be like, I don't know if this is going to be good. It's going to be another Avengers thing. So it was already coming out. Oh, no. It was already coming out with not a lot of faith because of Avengers and because also it's the same publisher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the fact that it, again, that's just a testament to good marketing and a good game, that it kind of came out when people were not really super interested in it, and it kind of came out on, on the back foot, and it is a success, and it's a really good game.
Yeah.
100%.
Imagine that.
Well, I think, guess what? We're recommending the game.
Yeah, I universally
this far and haven't played it.
Universally, because it's a space game.
Universal Church of Truth. Get it? Huh? All right. With that, I think now we can universally say it's time to end the show before we get even worse puns out.
Let's not leave a lot of space at the end for dawdling.
End it. cut the stream, Ryan.
The outro is playing right now. So, as always, podcast Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. You can occasionally catch a Gamescast coming your way. We're going to be doing Game Awards stuff happening soon. Game Pass Games Club next week. Yeah.
Maybe we'll try stuff in the future. Who knows?